Hello everyone and welcome to the second part of the second episode of the first season of Cause and Effect, a show about VTES. Today we are talking about allies and ally decks, and if you have missed the first part, you should go ahead back and listen to that before you listen to this, because we're probably going to reference to some of the things we already have said. Anyway, if you have seen the first part, then you're in for a treat, because this is the second part, where we'll talk about the more specific decks. And we are going to talk about the Ghoul deck, and we are going to talk about the Puppeteer deck and the Nephandus deck. And later we are going to talk about the combos, and of course we're going to announce the winner of last week's challenge, and challenge you guys anew. Anyway, let's talk about Ghouls. Let's talk about Ghouls, baby. Isaac, shoot.
I thought Adam should shoot or think.
Okay,
Adam,
I'll shoot.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
No problem.
We're looking at a. Okay, no, I'm not gonna try to pronounce that. I already massacred one person's name. Okay, it's apparently a good player from Poland who plays a Ghoul deck, and this is something that I would call like a speed Ghoul or something like that. It's really focused. It's a 60-card deck that which only wants its Ghouls out and just try to rush you down. And I think it's we've already touched on that. Like you want to get a Ghoul out fast and start rushing your predator to actually stay alive, because you can't do it without rushing your predator.
Okay. Let's talk about, before we talk about the specifics of the deck, let's talk about the ally Ghoul. What does it do and how does it do it? Isaac, can you explain for us?
This is like an exam. It's a 5-pool ally that's got... Is it? 3-pool ally with... Oh my. 5 life, 4 strength.
That's all the viewers can see it, so I have the card up.
That's embarrassing. And it has a prevent for once. And it's got a corner case ability. You can tap it to burn, tap the Ghoul to burn any location. Let's see. So this is probably the most durable of all the non-unique allies. Obviously the different Wraiths are very durable, but I think this is the most durable of the non-unique allies, because of the prevent. 5 lives is a lot. Yeah, and it's got the rush. This can be a problem. It's a bit corner case-ish, but the Ghoul deck can only rush vampires or Ghouls. So if you face the imbues, you're screwed.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're screwed. There's nothing you can do about it. But any other deck, it's probably corner case. If you face another ally deck that also maybe a Shaman deck or something like that, it doesn't really matter that much.
But I want to talk about the what you call the corner case special. I don't think that's really that corner case actually. There is a strategy with the Ghoul deck that you can employ, which is that you actually don't rush that much. Like if you feel safe, that you feel that you can block your predators, like if it's no stealth kind of deck, you can actually stay on top with all your Ghouls, and as soon as someone tries to start stealing them, you can burn them instead. This way you only lose, like how we touched upon neutralizing 2 allies with the actual stealing. You can make them burn instead, and this can save you some headache. So it's more like a long-term kind of strategy, but it's only applicable every now and then, not every single time. And of course, it's only applicable if there actually is a location in play.
Yes. It's important to note that this is tap to burn, as in tap is a cost, so you can only use the ability on an untapped Ghoul. So the thieving player needs to target tap Ghouls. Like, it's very tempting to steal an untapped War Ghoul, because then you get a rush with it, but then on the other hand, you won't get the War Ghoul.
Yeah.
And as I see in the chat now, for some live input, Thiago Boom says that you can tap the War Ghoul to destroy secure heaven, and obviously that's good.
It's a really good point, actually.
Yeah. So it's, thank you, Thiago.
Okay. Well, moving on. Adam, how do you play it, and what does it do?
Yeah, it's really fast, actually. You want to get one of the low cap vampires out, like the cap 2 or cap 3. Is there a cap 3? Okay, this particular deck does not play with the cap 3 vampire, but you want to get a minion out fast so you can start getting the War Ghoul. The first one is like the most crucial one, as soon as you possibly can. And then rush someone and play trap.
Or what will happen when you play trap with a War Ghoul?
Yeah, it'll do, because the prevent is once each round, so cardless for both parts, a War Ghoul will do 12 damage with one trap. That's quite strong.
How much did you say? 12?
12, yeah.
Yeah.
So 12, no, 4 strands, no, sorry, 16 damage. 3 presses makes 16 damage, cardless. So, if you're facing someone like Inner Circle kind of deck, and someone turns out Erica as the first vampire, you want to start rushing and play the trap as soon as you can, because either if you want, he plays the Majesty, and you say, darn it, and you try again later, but you need to do it to get the Majesties out. So you start back rushing, and when you're done with your Predator, you start going forward. And in that way, it's a kind of standard rush deck. But in this, like when you're doing with the allies, you actually don't have any problem with card clogging, because they have the built-in combat and the built-in rush. So yeah, you just start rushing, and eventually you want to play Fortress and or play Dragonbound to just start ousting. And this deck actually includes some changelings, which is nice. It's a stealth card, of course, as well, to get the War Ghouls, but also it's a bleed card, so that's yeah.
And you probably shouldn't forget about the plasmic form either. Like if you take account the ceiling, because of the dodge, if a War Ghoul gets stolen and they start rushing your vampires, you could pull off a few dodges and buy you a few more turns, and that could be the few more turns that you need to actually deal with like the presence deck that have a few entrancement. If it's the simply irresistible deck, then I think you're screwed.
Okay, quick then. Weaknesses of this deck, Isaac. Do you have any input?
First off, either there's 2 actions to get a War Ghoul, or there's 1 master facing and 1 action to get a War Ghoul, because of the additional cost with burning a retainer or ally for the War Ghoul. So you either need to play your Jake Washington, or you need to get one of the 4 different retainers in this deck. So every War Ghoul costs 2 actions, and you should take that into account when comparing it to, for instance, Shambling Hordes. That's one thing. Another thing is they cost pool. It's 3 pool, and maybe you think that's not that much, but 3 pool is actually a lot. And considering that losing 1 War Ghoul probably make you end up losing 2 War Ghouls, because if you keep on eating the rushes with your Smiths, that's a big problem.
Adam, how do you think this deck holds up against other rush ally decks, like Renegade Garou or other decks like that?
The Renegade Garou has...
you can probably take that, no?
Sorry?
You can take the card up. Or?
Oh, yes, of course. It does have the maneuver, which makes it able to control the combat in a way. That means that the Garou will, what should you say, have the initiative. It can choose whether or not it wants to fight. Of course, this deck and most Warghoul deck includes maneuvers, the fake out, but it won't have that every single time, and so on. It totally destroys Nephandus. It's really bad against the what's it called? Nocturne. Yeah. I don't know what to say. I don't feel like a Rush ally deck will face lots of other ally decks. It's not that common of a theme. I haven't actually thought about that. So.
More like, okay, okay. Well, more like, how do you think it holds up? Is it better or worse than other Rush ally decks?
Yeah, it does have the advantage of actually being strong in combat. Most ally decks are not actually strong in combat. Most ally decks are okay, but the Warghoul, it takes a lot of effort to actually kill. The Animalism doesn't outright kill it. The Animalism deck needs to stock up a lot of cards to just actually start doing damage to it. Like every round he wants to fight, he needs to include 8 combats, and you can't taste, as said, and the Warghoul has to prevent every single round, which is a problem for Animalism because it wants to fight over multiple rounds. But it's kind of weak against maneuvers, and especially maneuvers with presses. This is one of the really good parts with Fortitude, Press Prevent, and Ship Guns. The Warghouls are totally nullified. They can't do shit, more or less.
Yeah, because the trap won't help that much. Yeah. You need to stack up 2 presses to get past 1 indomitability, and it probably won't happen. Another drawback with this Warghoul deck is that you probably won't be able to have any bounce in your deck. I see that this script plays enough guys with superior specs to actually pull it off, and he does. But the cost of playing the bounce with the Warghouls is a cost in speed and pool. So instead of going for like a 2-3 cap crypt, where the Smithies only cost 2 or 3 pool, and you get them really fast, and you get out the more speedy version of the Warghoul deck, you have to invest the extra pool and the extra time to be able to bounce.
Okay.
I'd like to talk about one card that's actually not included in this one that's a bit interesting when you're talking about Warghouls, and that's just quickly talk about Lobotomy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know the card, but it makes this ally. You use it as an action modifier when you recruit an ally, and that ally is tapped when recruited, but is immune to dominate and presence cards. So you can't use Force Master and Transmit on the vampire. So yeah, it's a nice addition that you could play if you actually want to force it to work with an entrancement heavy meta.
Yeah. Okay, but you cannot use maneuvers then.
No, if you can't, and it's always risky. Then you have a 3-card combo that you need to be able to play a single Warghoul. You need a Lobotomy, you need a Warghoul, and you need the ally retainer. So the cost is very high to be able to play Lobotomy. I don't think it's as if you expect entrancement heavy meta or presence heavy meta, because most presence decks includes a few copies of entrancement because it's so strong. Don't play ally decks. Actually, I can't put it any simpler than that. So the 2 main things: if you face combat or if you face entrancement, put your ally decks away.
Okay. Adam, any last thoughts about the Warghoul deck?
No, I think we're done.
Okay. I think it's good that I have a few last thoughts anyway. I think it's good that the allies are very strong, and they're very kind of cheap in pool. There's just 3 pool, but and I think that's kind of cheap with what you get.
Yes.
Okay, moving on then to the Puppeteer deck. Tell us a little bit about this deck. Isak, this time.
Okay, this is I try to pronounce it Orion Gisler, maybe, or something like that. He's a very, very good French player. These days, he don't play as much. He used to be number 1 in the world ranking, etc., etc. And he's built this deck and won with it. I just see a Puppeteer.
Yeah, I'll put on. Okay, I'll switch to the deck now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Start off by talking about deck. This is an ally deck, obviously, because you rely on, especially the Puppeteers, but the other Wraiths as well. And in this deck, a few Shambling Hordes. But you don't play it as a War Ghoul deck or Shambling Hordes deck, because this is not a rushing deck. This is a Giovanni Power Bleed deck with some Puppeteers in. So basically you have a Giovanni Power Bleed crypt where you focus on Dominate and Necromancy. This deck you have, the star players are Andrea Giovanni, Ledin Thu, Isabel Giovanni and Rodolfo Giovanni. The only news there is probably Andrea Giovanni. He doesn't see as much play as Ledin Thu, Isabel Giovanni and Rodolfo Giovanni. And you rely on the Puppeteers to help you out. Basically your ousting method is a bleed for 6, maybe 1 stealth, and 1 block denial. That's the general idea. You have some of the European stealth tech to help you out. You have a few blood gain. But the Puppeteers are, as I play it, and as I see it, they're for 2 things. You have them either for combat defense. They have got 1 intercept. They're cheap. 1 pool is not a lot. And they block. And if Theobel or Beast come rushing to you, they can kick the sorry Puppeteers as much as they like, because it doesn't matter.
Okay. We should probably talk a little bit more about the Puppeteer before we move on.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Oh, you're the host.
Adam, explain the Puppeteer.
Okay. It's a Wraith ally, which costs 1 pool and have a minion steal action. It's only for cap less than 5, but it's most of the time actually usable because of how that's normally the vampires that you leave untapped, or you want to leave untapped. You want to act with your big vampires and leave your lesser cap vampires untapped. So it is frequent use, the special ability of the Wraith, or the Puppeteer. And additionally, it has the synergy with Shroud Mastery, which is only useful with Wraith. I'll put it up like this.
Yeah, Shroud Mastery do.
It's key for this to work, actually. It wouldn't be playable without it.
It works as it's a cloak for Wraith allies on inferior necromancy. Gives it 1 stealth when Wraith is acting, or on superior you can use it when you announce an action to recruit or employ a Wraith to untap. So that means you can get a Puppeteer as a first action with Shroud Mastery, and then just do the normal govern down and bring out vampires. You don't actually lose speed from employing Puppeteers.
And that is the key. If there wasn't any multi-acting with getting the Wraith with Shroud Mastery, this deck would be so bad. For real, it would be horrible.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why you don't see this deck around much is probably because they're not that much of focus on the Puppeteers. They're not the main thing of the deck. But the other thing is that these 2 are rare cards, and they're from Final Nights, which kind of weird expansion or edition. Not that many players tend to buy the more not the core sets. Most players want to buy the Camarilla edition or the Keeper's edition or 3rd edition or Jihad, those expansions. So I think that's one of the reasons you don't see as much play. Or maybe because people don't think it's strong enough. But this deck, like the Puppeteer Shroud Mastery combo with the Dominate Bleed, and in this case it's a tap bleed European stealth deck, it's got a lot of similarities to the Nocturne deck. And that deck you see in play a lot. And I think there's a few reasons for that. if I could elaborate.
Yeah.
For one thing, the Nocturne have the Shroud Mastery thingy in this card text. You untap when you get the Nocturne. And it doesn't cost you... it costs a blood instead of a pool. And in some cases that's better to pay the blood, but in some cases that's worse. It depends on like where the table's at. Sometimes blood is more important, sometimes pool's more important. But so that's not that big a bigger thing. And obviously the Nocturne deck gets more streamlined because of that. Because you don't need two cards to make it work, you only need one. But on the other hand, you lose the utility from the Wraiths. Like the Puppeteer stealing thing, and you have the Shroud Master to cloak it through. And you have the unique Wraiths that you can play in this deck too. Could you bring up the deck list again, Adam?
Yes, I can.
And in this particular deck, it's Ambrosius and Ty Cooper, and those two Wraiths are great because they're immune to non-aggravated damage. And you seldom see aggravated damage. It's a lot more common with like ordinary damage. So they help a lot. They're immortal. Every time someone comes rushing you, they have to go through one or two immortal Wraiths first. So they lose rushes. In a sense, they lose action. So that's very, very strong. But also you have the two other allies. You have Felix Fix Hessian, who has bleed and can destroy locations.
Take that up. Let's see what it does.
And you have Brigitte Gebauer, that's the other unique Wraith. She got 2 bleed and a special that helps with bleed. So those two allies could also be played in this deck. With the same logic, you untap after you get them, and you can use the cloaking effect of Shroud Mastery to make their either bleeds or destroy location action go through. So here you have an ally deck. He plays 3 Unmasking, he plays FBI Special Affairs, he plays a considerable amount of allies, like about 10 of them, and but it's not the biggest part of the strategy. You can win without ever playing a single ally with this deck. So if you have what some people refer to a bad draw, in this case it would be only drawing Dominate Bleed. It's actually not a bad draw. So if you play a Warghoul deck and you don't draw any Warghouls early on, that's horrendous. On the other hand, yeah, please stop me.
Okay. Adam, do you have anything to say about Isaac's obvious hard-ons in this deck? Or
I've only played against it twice, and I've never played it myself. Yeah, Isaac knows a lot more about the deck. But from what I can tell, it's dead on. You get allies, you beat for 6. Your allies can help you either oust or stay alive. It's quite... it has utility, like it's broad enough to do different things, but it also has a lot of ousting power.
Yes.
Yes.
And it benefits from the usual shenanigans of the Giovanni clan, like
Sidario.
the blood gain stuff, but mostly Sidario refraction.
Yeah, and as we talked about in our pilot, I believe.
Yes, so if you want to know our elaboration on the loop, then check that out.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I have any more thoughts about the Puppeteer deck. Isaac was quite clear. Should we move on then?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about let's see here. The Nephandus deck. Okay.
Do you want me to talk about it, or?
Yes, I do. Please.
Okay.
I had my lion's share.
Yeah. Okay. This particular iteration is one that Hugh played when playing in America, the Week of Nightmares, 2007. The Nephandus deck almost exclusively focuses around the vampire Antonio Derlet, which special, I'll bring him up, which is a good idea.
Yeah, of course.
Which special allows you to get Anton, maybe? Sorry, I can't spell that name. Okay, so it makes you be able to get the Nephandus without an action, which is one of the really strong parts about the Nephandus deck, is the synergy with this vampire. So you want to get Antonio out and start getting at least one ally each turn, and if you think you can get away with it without being blocked, you can try to get 2 each turn. This eats into your transfers, of course, so you'll get less vampires, but on the other hand, this translates into more actions with your vampires, as you don't need to recruit as many. So that's how the deck normally tries to work. I'll bring up a Nephandus now, and the Nephandus ally, like one of the biggest strengths of it is its special part, which says that opposing minions inflict 1 less damage on him. This is a really big thing about the deck, I think, because of how this allows you to get out of most combats without any losses, in the same way that Warghoul does, of course, but this one costs a little less. It doesn't cost an action with Antonio and costs 2 pool instead, and this 1 less damage is actually better than 1 prevent. Because it's like sorry, I can't bring up any examples. You know,
Yeah, for instance, there's a lot of cards that says you can't prevent, or you can't prevent with this or that discipline, for instance.
Yeah. Of course, and also it has a press, so it does 1.
Yeah, and it helps against additional strikes also.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I don't know, it can bleed as well. It makes it kind of like generic. You can use it for combat, you can block with it, or you can bleed with it. That's a big part of why the Nephandus is popular. It can do a lot of stuff. And it has the action to remove vampires and torpor, which makes it a bit more resilient, and
that brings us up to the next question, actually, bringing vampires to torpor. This deck's focus on combat. Would you care to explain all them?
Yeah, it's 1 damage built in and a press built in, 2 damage from the start, but with a trap this is 5 damage, and also, as you see, it's really, really popular to include Molotov cocktails.
Yeah.
A single Molotov cocktail, because of how the Nephandus already has a press, it's 2 aggravated for 1 card, so it's quite efficient. Just play a rush, you play a Molotov, you do 2 aggravated, and you get no damage back. Well, unless they have combat cards, of course. But more or less, that's how you want the combats to work. And it could be really, really strong.
And how do you win with it?
Minion superiority, and rushing the key vampires around the table, bleeding when necessary, and of course, the fact that you actually have Tremere Anti-Tribute as a requirement means that you have Dominate. So you can include Govern and Conditioning, as well as Stealth and Deflections. So it has a lot of, it's like a all-around deck in a lot of ways. You can do lots of different stuff with it. It's strategically diverse in a sense, I would say.
Weaknesses then, Isaac?
Karen Kraus, the biggest weakness of this ally. Because they die instantly to Karen Kraus. Because how environmental damage is handled by the rules. The -1 damage from the opposing minion does not apply because the Kraus are not the opposing minions, they're the environment. Just like we're here and there's Kraus and they die.
Okay.
So that's an obvious drawback. But also, like, this is the most all-around of all the good allies, since it's decent in combat, it got bleed, so it can bleed, it's a decent blocker because it's so resilient in one way, not when it comes to carrying crowds, obviously. And this comes back to the Nephandus being kind of stupid in one way, because it's on or off. Either the other players can handle your Nephandus, and then it's game over for you. If you face an animalism deck, they will probably pack 15 Carrion Crows. This is an extreme deck. It got 9 Nephandus. You can play 10 or 11, but you will never get past 15 Carrion Crows. So, 1 Carrion Crow is 1 Nephandus. That's 2 pool damage for you, and losing the actions and all the ability. And in a sense, also, we continue. It's kind of slow. It's because Antonio Delette gets out to play in 2 turns. And after that, you get Nephandus with your transfers, or you get out more vampires. So you don't get like the snowballing effect of the other allies decks as much. So it's 1 Nephandus a turn, or if Antonio takes the action, that's 2 a turn. It doesn't snowball. With a War Ghoul deck or Shaman War decks, every turn you could bring out a new vampire, you probably will, and you will add a new action, you follow me, the snowballing effect doesn't exist in the same extent in the Nephandus deck. So it's kind of slow in that way. And it gets even worse if you face any deck that can kick its ass. 1 slam, and it's dead, for instance.
Adam, what about the drawback of Antonio Delette? I mean, it's a really good special ability, but what happens if you cancel him out?
You need to take actions to get allies. And this is like the reason why you play Nephandus. The biggest reason, as I see it in a way, is that you can't be blocked. And if you can be blocked when recruiting the allies, you lose a really big part of the advantage of the deck. This might not always be a problem, of course, but in the cases where it is a problem, you have the totally wrong deck for it. It's actually not even like funny. It's just you're screwed in more ways than one. So, yeah. But it's Antonio. You have a reasonable chance to actually survive more or less anything, because he has superior thaumaturgy and mirror walk. So even if you try to get a Nephandus, you risk taking the action. The worst thing that happens is that it gets blocked. You can play mirror walk superior and you'll survive. So it's quite reasonable.
Because it cancels the combat.
Yes, exactly. Mirror walk makes the combat not happen. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's reasonable to assume that you will not be losing Antonio Delette. But the vampire in itself is not incredibly strong. It's not a vampire. It's a bad vampire. It's a mid-cap with dominate and thaumaturgy. But it's inferior dominate, and 5 pool for inferior dominate is quite a lot.
I mean, the key point here being that you should always play Antonio Delette, or could you play an Nephandus deck without him? Is it plausible?
Presumably, I'd say. I actually don't know. I haven't seen it. You can include a few Nephandus in decks with Tremere anti-tribute, but then it's just a few, and it's not like a Nephandus deck for real. But I think you were saying?
Yeah, that's actually my point. Like, Nephandus is kind of common. If you go to the the tournament winning deck archive and search for Nephandus, you see that the most common use for Nephandus is a few, 1, 2, or 3. The extreme like Nephandus focus deck is not as common. Okay. So it's a very good ally, but it's kind of silly in a way.
Yeah. And last thoughts then about the Nephandus deck before we move on.
We probably should say that we're aware of this as a deck that won a tournament pre the ban of Memories of Mortality, but our deck archetype is valid valid without the memories of mortalities. Of course, it would be a lot better with the memories of mortality, but
that's a whole other show. Okay, then moving.
Yeah, before you are moving on, one more thing. This is an ally deck with Dominate, and that's the best kind of ally decks. Because if you compare this deck to the Warghoul deck, my gut tells me that the Tremere anti-triggers will be a lot more useful. They will deflect, they will be bleeding for 5 or 6 when you have like torporized minions and such. So you have the ability to rush and control the table, and you have the ability to snipe VPs, like launch for 1 round and get the VP.
Yeah, of course. You see, it's like 6 conditioning in this deck, so you could oust with it, just do it. So, of course, Dominate is always good.
Yeah.
Next point on the agenda, we are going to talk about other allies, not as commonly used or as commonly seen. Adam, do you have an ally that you think is underappreciated or like unspoken of generally?
Sure, I can bring up some. We can talk about the Bima vampire, or the Bima ally, sorry.
Yeah.
I'll bring up the card, but it's a ally that you get a discipline for when you you recruit the ally, you choose a discipline card in your hand, and this ally can play that discipline. It requires follows a set, so if you want to have a streamlined, efficient deck, it kind of requires you to have the same discipline on one of your vampires. The strongest variation, in my opinion, would probably be this Dominate, with some of the Dominate set types. It's a quite fun deck, actually. It's like Queenie Dominate with Stealth.
Any comments? Yeah, any comments on the Bima? It's like, why doesn't it see a lot of play?
I'm going to go with a material, like the materialistic explanation for this one. I think it's not that easy to get a hold of enough Bimas to be able to play them.
Okay.
That could be one of the explanations. Another thing could be like the thing Adam says. Probably the best thing with them is to put a Dominate master card on them. And if you do that, it ends up being like Dominate Winnie. And I don't know, most people don't want to play Dominate Winnies, so. But you could experiment with other disciplines, maybe go for Auspex and play a more blockish deck, go for Obfuscate and Stealth heavier. They got 2 strength, you could maybe go for like Fortitude, Prevent, Rush sort of deck with Pocket Vitals and with Walking Sticks, something like that maybe. I don't know. But I think there's a lot experimentation that you could do with that.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any allies you want to raise a flag for?
Yes, my old-time favorite, the Reanimated Corpse.
Okay, let's bring it up.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the Samdi plan is awful. And that's probably the main reason why it's hard to play, because this ally is golden. Like, having an ally that it bleeds for 2 is so insanely strong. I actually played a deck with this one time during the ECQ in England, Burton-on-Trent, and got to the finals. It was my proudest moment. But it's the 2 bleed that makes this a very interesting ally.
Yeah, what does it do?
As the card says, 2 bleed, 2 life, 2 strength. It enters play with an amount of pulse counters. The pulse counters determine for how many turns it will be in play. And it can also play Basic Fortitude, combat card that requires Basic Fortitude as a vampire.
Yeah, and you remove pulse counters.
Each turn. So the number of pulse counters determines how many turns it will be in play.
Yeah.
So, and that costs an X plus 2 blood to determine. So you get a lot of bleed on the table with. If you play the Sandy clan and you only play the group 2 crypt, you get a lot of Sandys that have basic 2 bleed, and you get these corpses that have a basic of 2 bleed. You could play Veil of Legions, Cloak the Gathering, and some of those Sandy Bloat cards. And maybe a few deflections with the Baron, and you have the Reanimated Corpse doing the blocking, hitting for 2 because they have strength of 2, or you bleed for 2 depending on the situation and what you need. So this is an ally that, if you count like the non-unique allies, that I enjoy. It's not tier 1 at all, but it's like 2 bleed in an ally that's non-unique. I think that's awesome.
Adam, do you have any thoughts about the Reanimated Corpse?
No, not the ally itself, but it requires that you have Thanatosis, and that's the Sandy vampires. And as Isaac says, they're quite bad. You need to find a way to work around that. But if you do, or I don't know, hypothetically you get Thanatosis on other vampires, like Iron Force, so with spontaneous power or whatever, they are really good when they're actually in play.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good allies, bad clan.
Yes.
Okay. Of course, if I should raise a flag for any ally, it's going to be the Mariavattagi, one of my all-time favorites. It's a really good card. Why don't you... can't see it right now. Adam, could you explain a little bit about the Mariavattagi?
It's a backhand required. It requires backhand, and it can play obfuscate as well as do damage as an action. So it's like an attrition ally, but it also has 3 life, so it can take a few hits, and it has 1 bleed, so it can bleed as well. So it's quite useful. Like it's versatile. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah. That's what I like most about it. It's versatile, and you can play. It's so good to be able to stealth with an ally. So you can bleed with stealth, and of course you can make damage with stealth as well. You can play. You could play Forgotten Labyrinth with it, and play with 2 stealth, and that's 1 life, of course. But then you can pick someone, and that's the best part of VTES. And pick is when you make a damage on a vampire, of course. Okay, Isak, what kind of fun things do you like to do with a Mariavattagi?
I right now actually have a black hand deck put together with the Mariavattagi and some other blood denial tech like Leech and some other blood denying allies, Youngblood, Gregor Winter, or Ocean, etc., etc. The problem is the black hand are not as focused, clan-wise or discipline-wise. So it's really hard to find. You want vampires with obfuscate, but you also want some defense, like bounce capabilities, and it's hard to find like the right mix and make it really competitive. But it's okay.
Okay. You guys have any other allies? Let's shout them out right now.
Nope.
Huh? Okay, then I have a question for you guys. Let's start with Adam. If you were stranded on a deserted island, which ally would you bring?
Tutto, the doubly cursed, or whatever his name is. It's an ally with multi-act. It has to do something awesome, right?
Okay, you could probably fetch food and build shelter at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. Isak, do you have a good answer in this question?
Yes, I bring Milan Horseseed.
Uh-huh.
Ask me why.
Okay, why?
He seems like a nice guy.
Okay, Tutta doesn't, so I guess Isaac has that.
Okay. Don't ask me because I haven't thought of any funny answers.
Okay then, let's move on.
Yeah, I think we have to move on actually. We're going to leave allies behind. We'll probably talk about them somewhere else or some time again. So they gone too far. Now we're going to talk about this week's card/combo or whatever you want to call it. And today we are going to talk about something that Isak has mentioned frequently. And it's the European stealth. And take it away, Isak, while Adam brings up the cards we're talking about.
So the European stealth, I think it was originally coined by Matt Morgan, or at least popularized by Matt Morgan. It's the misdirection, the pentex subversion, and the anarch troublemaker. And to some extent, you could also include blind spot, but misdirection and pentex subversion and anarch troublemaker is the three most important ones. And you use these and bounces to some extent, and maybe multi-act either through freak drive or majesty to get your prey to get out of blocks rather than get out of intercept. So that's a different strategy to deal with blocking decks. So you basically rely on 0 or just 1 stealth and make your prey waste blocks and weights trying to block you. So ideally, you start your turn with anarch troublemaker in play. You hand it to your prey. You tap two of his untapped guys. You master phase. If he has another untapped guy, you play misdirection. Or if it doesn't have an untapped guy, maybe it got some guy with say Eternal Vigilance, and no secret from the Magaji or something like that, or an blocking ability in a special text, you give them pentex subversion. Or if there's a designated blocker like a star blocking deck, you give that guy the pentex. And then you start bleeding. And preferably with Dominator Presence, and preferably with maybe like 4 or 5 minions in play, and everyone bleeds for 6. And maybe have a few Daring the Dawns, if he managed to play awake or so. And if you, before your turn started, were able to play some bounces to your prey, then every bounce played to your prey would be an additional wake or block attempt that your prey needs to do. So if you're in a good spot, maybe you'll be able to bounce 2 bleeds to your prey. That's 2 blocks he needs to declare. You hand down a troublemaker, and if that anarch troublemaker taps 2 guys, that's another 2 blocks that you get wasted. And the pentex or the misdirection, the pentex could be another block that's wasted, or the pentex could be very, very, very minimum blocks wasted for that person.
Adam, do you have any thoughts about the European stealth package?
The fact that these cards exist makes the defensive strategies cost a lot more strategically and card-wise for a block deck to actually function. Like, a block deck needs to take into account that he might be played pentex on. A responsible block deck would play like Ravenspire on 2 different minions, for instance, instead of put 2 Ravenspires on 1 minion. And he would also need to include like obfuscate minions, like if it's a Star Vampire deck. You need to include minions that can spell or play Daring the Dawn to remove pentex. Or he needs to include a lot of sudden reversals. Or if you're talking about anarch troublemaker, you might actually, your prey might be threatened enough by the anarch troublemaker that he taps out every single turn. Like, he's like, okay, I can't, if I'll be tapped with 2 of my minions, I'll lose these 2 actions, so I might as well act this turn. And then you don't send it, and then the next turn it reasons in the same way. So, you might, even the direct damage doesn't, even if that doesn't make the difference, the fact that the blocking deck or the deck who wants to defend against you needs to think about these things is a value in itself as well.
Okay. Last thoughts about the European stealth before we move on, Isaac?
The European stealth, you don't have to play it just without stealth. If you play the European stealth and you play obfuscate, then it gets incredibly hard to deal with as a blocking deck. Incredibly hard. Especially if you vote with that, because then they can't bounce.
Okay.
So these cards are very good in master heavy decks, like the different Girls Will Find decks or Geezers Will Find decks. Also strong. So most of the time, the European stealth is very strong. But maybe you don't need to play 2 of each card if you play Obfuscate as well. Maybe you only need to play 2 of these cards and 1 copy of each. But they're very good to deal with walls, especially the pentex, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Well, enough about enough. Let's talk a little bit about our winner, our challenge. And we are very, very proud to present. Drum roll, please. Extrala has won our challenge with his deck named Protellicious. Okay, cool. Adam, what are we looking at?
We're actually not looking at anything right now because I don't have the list.
Okay.
Isaac, maybe if you could put it in the...
It's in already. Just scrolled, huh?
It's in.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so
I'm multitasking, goddammit.
Okay, fine. We're looking at it in a second. Here, I'll find it. I just looked at it.
Okay.
There we are. Yeah, it's a Exiled the Cloud with Toreador Anti-Tribute Presence Protein deck. And the Toreador Anti-Tribute are there, presumably mainly because of how they're actually quite good. This group has a lot of protein, and the Toreador Anti-Tribute, one of the strongest clan cards they have is the Palagranda. So it functions quite nicely. All the synergizes quite nicely with Palagranda and the Toreador Anti-Tribute, as well as the card Dual Form, which they can play too.
Can we bring up Dual Form?
Yes, I will do so.
And this was like the part that made me smile and clap my hands together like this. Because Dual Form, I think, is a very underplayed card. Because it doubles as a freak drive on Inferior, and on Superior you get like the cloning effect. But you only get to clone the discipline and the capacity in the clan, not the card text. So you can't benefit from any special abilities. Like having 2 Exiled the Clouds in play with her special ability would obviously be silly strong, but that is not the case. Here you're stuck with the disciplines. And the way that Extrala, that is Ralph Lammert, built this deck is he based it on Presence Bleed and Protein as combat defense / stealth. So he only relies on the disciplines, and he gets the plus bleed from the Heart of the City, and you get the multi-act through Dual Form. And you use both Exiled and the Toreador Anti-Tribute to defend yourself with bounces. So you have both Auspex bounce and the ordinary bounce from Exiled the Cloud.
Adam, what was it that made you, like, your heart beat a little bit extra strong when you read this deck list?
It's all of it put together. As I said, it synergizes really nicely. Most of the cards fit in with the other cards. There's nothing like this is an extraneous part. But you think most of the deck kind of fits in nicely together with the other parts. Say like a Bombe and Enkel Cog is obviously so that you can get Exinia and Enkel Cog, and this makes the Dual Form be useful for more than one thing, because you can multi-act with it, as Isaac says. And yeah, the Presence Protein combination of disciplines they complement each other in a nice way, I think, because Presence is tap bleedy and Former Mistress is a tap bleed card as well.
Could you bring up the deck list?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I just forgot. And most of the cards actually, it feels like there's not that much you want to put away. Like you possibly, or of course you can remove some part of the deck, but it won't be the same deck. It's nothing like really bad about it. It just fits nicely together, and that's what persuaded me.
The things that I would like to change with the deck list, if I were to build it myself, is probably decrease the amount of only Kiviv and increase the amount of Dual Form, because you have the copying ability and the multi-act ability. And probably add some more blood gain.
Okay. Well, anyway, it was a really cool deck, and we'd like to congratulate the winner, Extrala, whose name is
Ralph Lammert.
Ralph, congratulations to you. Okay, this week we have a special challenge for you guys. We're challenging you guys to build what we call a blood denial deck. Adam, what's a blood denial deck?
It functions through these actions that Anders called pick actions. It's you remove blood from vampires through action, not like actually during a combat, not necessarily at least, not through a combat, but with the allies like Gregory Winter and Ossian and Impandaru and Mariovatagi that has actions that removes blood and kind of controls other vampires through the actions which are not rushes and which are like permanently in the allies.
Yeah, so you can't use combat defense to get away from the damage.
Exactly.
Yes.
And monsters. Of course, you can pack a few blood denial monsters. What are we talking about, Isaac?
You could use Society of Leopold. You could use Vampiric Disease. But also, you benefit from villain. Since, at least the meta we play in Sweden, there's a lot of villain. And people tend to act instead of block. And if you face block combat, then you probably be beaten in the combat and don't do any damage. But if you face like an acting deck that plays villain, you can benefit from them being on low blood and relying on high damage bolts or high damage bleeds, and try to torporize them with a few actions.
And of course, Society of Leopold, as you mentioned, is real strong in this kind of deck.
Yeah, you should also probably name drop the different actions like Leech that add one for allies, Horseshoe for potence, Cryptic Missions for thaumaturgy, Shadow Twin for obtenebration. Am I forgetting anything?
Probably.
Temptation could also be something to benefit from this. Stealing the guys with low blood.
Okay, anyway, it's that's our challenge for you guys, and it's your imagination that puts out the boundaries. Think freely. And don't forget to include a description, because it makes it much easier for us to evaluate your deck lists. And of course, we are going to pass all of our the entries in our last challenge, and of course the winner on our Facebook page, and probably on the Veken forum. And I think that's enough for that. Do you have any last comments or thoughts of this week's episode that's now spanning over 2 hours? Soon, Isaac.
Yeah, the subject of allies is a really big subject. I feel that we probably have missed a lot of reasoning that you could do about allies. And at some point we are bound to return to this subject and elaborate more on it. But I hope this is a good foundation of thoughts and ideas and strategies concerning allies and how to play against them and how to play with them.
Adam?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons that can be learned from playing ally decks is how meta-dependent some decks can be, because allies are so meta-dependent. I would only risk, and I only encourage others to risk playing ally decks when you're actually quite sure of what you're going to face.
Okay. Well, I've had a lot of fun, and it's been a good show. Next week, I don't know what we're going to talk about, but maybe Isaac won't be drinking wine, so we'll maybe be talking a little bit less. I'm sorry, Isaac.
God damn it.
Well, okay, everyone. Well, that's it for this time. Thanks, everyone, for watching. And remember, if you have any thoughts, comments, or ideas, you can post on our Facebook page, or send an email to the address below, causeampersandeffect at gmail.com, and we will, as usual, post a thread on veken.net where you can discuss what we talked about further. So thank you, everyone. Have a good week, and remember, kids, every action has a reaction.
Bye!